Well, hey, we've been in a teaching series called The Aftermath, and I've really been enjoying it. I hope you have. But you don't need to answer that. But I've really been enjoying the study side of it. It's been fun for me to really dive into those 40 days, the aftermath of the resurrection of Jesus, the time where he was alive on earth, and those interactions he had with his disciples, and how the aftermath of the resurrection of Jesus and his ascension into heaven continues to this day. And, you know, it's been fun to look at the immediate days that followed his death and his resurrection. And we're going to continue again today to look at that. And excited next week for Pastor Josh to kind of let all this make sense. So the pressure's on him, I guess, as he wraps the series up. But we have to kind of have this working definition of the aftermath. The aftermath is really the consequences or the side effects of a significant event, right? So it's anything. It could be something big that you have faced. It could be something just culturally, something we see in the news, something that happens globally where you see a big event. And the aftermath is the consequences or the side effects of that big thing. Have you ever faced something big in your life? You ever experienced the aftermath, the days that follow that big thing? It's really this idea that life is never the same as the result, that it was heading one direction, it was going one way, and as the result of this moment, this event, this thing that happened, life is kind of going in another direction now. Have you ever experienced something so significant? And I think what's been interesting for me is that this is exactly what happens to the followers of Jesus, the early followers, his early disciples, is they face some pretty major moments, some pretty significant events, right? They experience the death of their Lord, the death of their rabbi, right? The one that they have followed for 3 years, the one that they have believed is the Messiah, and they experienced firsthand the resurrection of Jesus, saw firsthand him ascend into heaven. What must that have been like as he drifts up into the air, right? I mean, it's funny, but it's not funny because it's exactly what happened, and these guys experienced that. What must that have been like? And so I want to look at that today. I want to take it maybe a step further, talk to us a little bit more what that looks like for us today. And to do so, I've been talking a lot about how the disciples really lived by sight and not by faith. Week 1 we talked about them on the two on the road to Damascus or Emmaus, and Jesus shows up with them on the road, and the Bible says they didn't see Jesus. He kept them from seeing him. And we talked last week about how Jesus shows up to see his disciples for the very first time in that upper room, and they're locked behind a closed door, afraid for their life, really. And Jesus he shows up, like right there. He doesn't even open the door. How rude. And he just shows up. And that the disciples are confused, that they think that they're seeing a ghost. In other words, they didn't believe what they saw. And I've been trying to help you understand, I think, this very important teaching to Christianity, to us, that we've got to be people who live by faith and not by sight. Right? This is central to the teaching that Jesus gave throughout his life, was to try to get his followers to not live by sight, but to live by faith, right? And yet what you find and what you see is in the moments immediately following the death of Jesus, his disciples, all they see is that their plans have been shattered, right? All they see is that he died and he's not coming back. All they see is that perhaps they just spent 3 years of their life following this false Messiah and wasted it. They're devastated, right? And the reason why they're facing so much devastation is because these men and these women, it's more than just the 11, by the way, but these people who followed Jesus, they were living by sight. They were not living by faith. And so I've been talking to you a lot about that. I've been telling you, it's so important. We've got to change the way that we see. We've got to look at things differently. And here's why. Because sight always influences belief. Did you know that? Sight always influences belief. What you see influences what you believe. how you see something always influences what comes next, right? How you see something influences what you believe about that thing, how you interpret it. It influences the outcome. It influences the aftermath. That's why two people can see the very same thing, and they can see it totally differently. Right? I mean, you can have somebody, I don't know, the context of your life, I don't know the things you have faced or maybe you will face. Have you ever faced a mountain? You ever faced a pretty big obstacle? You ever had something in your path that just seemed so difficult, so impossible? The way you see it influences what you believe about that thing. And some people, they see obstacles, they see mountains, they see these things in front of them, these things they didn't plan on, these things they didn't expect. And they see it, and it influences their belief, and they start to believe that there's no way around it or there's no way over it. Have you ever felt like that? You ever felt like that? The reason why so many of us find ourselves kind of falling into that type of thinking has everything to do with where our eyes are fixed. And when your eyes are fixed on that mountain, when your eyes are fixed on that obstacle, that thing right in front of you, it will start to shape your belief. It will start to shape what you believe about that thing. It's immovable. There's no way around it. It's the way life is. And you find your belief system starts to be influenced by where your eyes are fixed and focused. What we've been learning over the last couple weeks is that in the aftermath of some pretty big events, the disciples had some misguided sight, right? As a result, in these moments, like their belief was pretty low, super low. I think the reason why I've been trying to needle this thought, to keep continuing to teach this back to back, this idea, is because what you see is not always trustworthy. Right? And we talked last week about how so often what you see doesn't build your faith. And when your eyes are fixed on these things, it starts to influence your belief about them. One of the things I've been trying to help you understand is that Jesus will always try to get you to live from a place of what you know, not from a place of what you see. That's central to the teaching of Jesus, right? That's the upside down way of God. To get you to live from a place of what you know, what he has said, what he has decreed, what he has declared, what he has spoken, what is promised in his scriptures. To live from a place of what you know, not from a place of what you see, because where your eyes are fixed and where your eyes are focused will absolutely influence what you believe. And I think it helps determine the outcome of those things. And so we've been looking at Luke 24 for the last couple weeks. We've been studying this and seeing some of those events, those moments right after the resurrection. And looking at the Gospel of Luke, and I love the Gospel of Luke for a lot of reasons. You know, there's four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and all of them are kind of from this different vantage point. If four men, they write their account, their version of the story, the life, the ministry of Jesus. And they each kind of appeal to a different audience, sort of a different crowd. And I like Luke's take. And Luke was this physician or this doctor. He was this educated man. He very detail-oriented. And you know, I think of that type of person. I mean, he would have made sure it was real. Made sure that it was worth jotting down before he did. And so I love just the extra detail sometimes he offers in his gospel. And he wrote another book. So it's the same man, same detailed man, and he wrote another book called the Book of Acts. And Acts is a book I want to look at today. I want to look at the first chapter of Acts. And in this whole book of Acts, he writes this book that spans and documents basically the first 30 years of life after the resurrection. The first 30 years or so of the church. And in Acts chapter 1, verse 4, Jesus is basically hanging out with his disciples. After he has resurrected, right? He is in that 40-day time period. He's coming towards the end where he's about to ascend into heaven. And he's hanging out with his disciples. And he begins to sort of foretell of an aftermath that's about to take place. Not just an event. He begins to tell of the aftermath. And what it says here is this. It says, once when he was eating with them, he commanded them, do not leave Jerusalem until the Father sends you the gift he promised. As I told you before, John baptized with water, but in just a few days you will be baptized with the Holy Spirit. Man, that's interesting, isn't it? It's so strange. It's just pretty incredible language for Jesus to use right there with his disciples. He's speaking about John the Baptist. John the Baptist baptized with water, but in just a few days, you're going to be baptized with the Holy Spirit. He uses that word baptized. It comes from a Greek word called baptizo, which means to immerse or to submerge. So think about it. Context, right? I mean, we baptize here, and we baptize by immersion, right? So you come and depending on how bad you lived your life and the amount of sin, we hold you down underneath longer than others or whatever. But I'm just kidding. I've always wanted to, but just because that's the way my mind works. But anyway, Jesus uses this word baptize, right? He uses it to give them a word picture, this idea. He's saying, you've seen me be baptized. You saw John baptize me, right? That's when Jesus' ministry really started, right? And he says, you've seen that. And what's about to happen, what's about to come is you're about to be baptized by the Spirit of God. You're about to be immersed. You're about to be submerged. Picture that. Picture that if you've ever been baptized. You've ever been baptized by immersion or submersion. And imagine that. Picture that thought there of being submerged by the Spirit of the living God. And he tells his disciples in this moment that is what is about to happen. In Acts 1:8, he says, you will receive power. He talks about the event, right? It's an event. He says, you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, and you will be my witnesses. That's the aftermath, right? He says, and you will be my witnesses, telling people about me everywhere in Jerusalem, throughout Judea, in Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. I read that this week, and I've read this many times, and that's a scripture, Acts 1:8, that I've that memorized for decades now. And I read it this week, and I'm thinking, and we've been doing so much looking and studying about the disciples. I just stopped and I thought, man, how bizarre that Jesus would say this to them, because the disciples were anything but a witness. I mean, up until now, they were anything but a witness. And these are not the kind of men that you would handpick to start a global movement, right? I mean, if you're trying to start something that's going to go global and impact, the ends of the earth that Jesus says here, these aren't the men you're going to handpick. I mean, you study their life, you study how they showed up in their 3 years of following Jesus, right? And they didn't do a whole lot right. I mean, these are men who, Jesus tells them, would you stay awake with me, the night before he's betrayed? He says, will you stay awake with me and pray with me through the night? And Jesus comes back and finds them all asleep. Awesome. Thank you, guys. Appreciate your loyalty there. And these are the men. Jesus is saying, you're going to be witnesses about my resurrection to the ends of the earth. Jesus dies, right? What happens? They're so afraid, they lock themselves in this upper room behind a closed door, afraid for their life. Hey guys, why don't you go start a global movement about the resurrection of Jesus that you're so happy to tell people about, right? It doesn't make any sense. Jesus, when he gets arrested, these guys, so loyal, do what any loyal follower would do, and they just run, right, for their life. And then Peter, the leader among his friends, he denies Jesus 3 times. Like, not once. Like, I never knew the man. I never knew the man. And yet Jesus looks at his followers, his disciples. He says, you will be my witnesses, telling people about me everywhere. In Jerusalem, which is where they were, their city, Judea, their region, Samaria, a place they never wanted to go, right? Samaria was like off limits. We avoided at all costs. That's where Samaritans live. That's not where any Jewish man would ever want to travel. They would actually travel out of the way to avoid entering Samaria at all costs. He says, you'll be my witnesses in Samaria as well, and to the ends of the earth. He says this to a whole bunch of men who I think have pretty much disqualified themselves from doing anything really significant for God. I told you when we started getting into this that sight always influences your belief, right? Sight always influences belief, and what you believe always determines how you behave, right? You know that. How you believe determines how you show up in life. choices you make, how you live your life, your moral compass, your moral code. How you believe determines how you behave. And so you look at these men and you see how they behaved. You see how they showed up. I mean, their belief was pretty messed up, wasn't it? They had believed some things that were not right, and it caused behavior to start to flow out of them that, I mean, is unlike anything any of us would want to model. How you believe always determines how you behave. They believed some things. They believed that Jesus was gone. It was over. He's not coming back to life. We've got to fend for ourselves now. They believed all of these things, and it produced in them behavior like fear. Like, I got to hide now. It produced this weak behavior in them. Because what you believe will always determine how you behave. And so Jesus begins to tell them about something incredible that's about to happen. He tells them you're about to have an experience that will change everything. And that's what the aftermath is, right? The aftermath is life never being the same. He says you're about to have an experience that is going to change the rest of your life. Every day that follows will be impacted by what's about to happen. He says you're going to receive some power. And I'd like to receive some power. He says you're going to receive some power, guys. I don't know. I mean, could you imagine? I mean, these guys are probably looking at each other, and they're just like, what, me? You certainly aren't going to receive any power. You know, I mean, I could imagine, right? They know each other. He says you're going to receive power. That word power, it comes from a Greek word called dunamis. It's where we get the word dynamite from, okay? Dunamis. He says you're going to receive dunamis power. Dunamis is a force, a miraculous power, the explosive power of God. They didn't say, hey, you're going to get a little bit of power. Jesus says you're going to get some explosive power, some miraculous power. And he says these to some very ordinary men that none of us would have handpicked to start a global movement. He says this in verse 9. He says, after saying this, he was taken up in a cloud. All right? Tells them about what's going to happen. You're going to receive some power, dudes. You're going to be my witnesses. And then he's taken up in a cloud while they're watching, and they could no longer see him. As they strained to see him rising into heaven, two white-robed men suddenly stood among them. Angels. Right? Men of Galilee, they said, why are you standing here staring into heaven? Jesus has been taken from you into heaven, but someday he will return from heaven in the same way you saw him go. I mean, I'd imagine they're probably just kind of waiting around. He said he's going to come back. Maybe we should just wait a little bit, you know? The angels finally have to come and say, hey, why don't you take off? Like, guys, go. Like, he's not coming back today necessarily. And in verse 12, then the apostles, right, returned to Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives, a distance of half a mile. When they arrived, they went to the upstairs room of the house where they were staying. Here are the names of those who were present: Peter, John, James, Andrew, Philip, Thomas, Bartholomew, Matthew, James, son of Alphaeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas, son of James. In verse 14, they all met together and were constantly united in prayer, along with Mary, the mother of Jesus, several other women, and the brothers of Jesus. During this time, when about 120 believers were together in one place. You know, I sometimes always picture like 12 people following Jesus, and then one who screwed up, and you know, and now it's 11. You know, I always like kind of picture when it talks about the disciples, I think of like, you know, just like now there's 11 people, and there really was like a lot of people who followed Jesus everywhere he went. And there was you know, women who were very close to Jesus throughout his ministry. There were other men. In fact, when they hand selected, you know, Matthias to be the replacement to Judas, they wanted someone who would have been an eyewitness to the resurrection and all the things they had seen Jesus did, which means he had been around the entire time. He wasn't one of the 12. And so what you find here in this place, they've gone back to Jerusalem, and you find Jesus has been raised from the dead. He has ascended into heaven. His disciples have come back to Jerusalem and now trying to figure out what's next. What are we going to do? And what I notice here is that nothing really noticeable about the disciples has changed up until now. Think about their experience. Think about what they have seen, right? I mean, these men have seen the resurrection of Jesus Christ. They have witnessed him as a man on earth doing miraculous miracle after miracle after miracle. They have seen some incredible things. And up until now, Jesus has ascended miraculously into heaven. nothing significant has really changed. They've just gone back to Jerusalem and they're sort of waiting. I mean, I think if I would have seen Jesus resurrected from the dead, seen him living and walking, man, you would not be able to shut me up. Hey, did you see Jesus? Right? Pretty miraculous. Nothing's really changed yet about them. So it's about 7 weeks after the resurrection. It's not a real long time. I mean, sometimes we forget, like this is really not that far off from when the resurrection took place, about 7 weeks. The city of Jerusalem is now filled with foreigners from all over that region, different nations, people who are coming to Jerusalem to celebrate another festival called Pentecost. And there's all sorts of folks in town for this. And the followers of Jesus, the 120, they are in an upper room waiting together and praying, doing what Jesus told them to do. And they're the core group, I guess, of the very first church that the world has ever seen, ever saw. And they're meeting in one place. And all of a sudden, what Luke describes as this mighty rushing wind descends upon Jerusalem. Specifically, where the 120 are meeting in this room, this mighty rushing wind. It's this great disruption that takes place in the city. And these followers of Jesus, these 120, are filled with the very Spirit of God in a pretty unusual way. And something shifts, something changes, and they actually get up, and they leave the room that they're all in, and they go out into the streets, and they begin to talk to these foreigners who have come from all over the world. They begin to tell them, preach the message, teach the message of the resurrected Jesus to them in their own language, in their own dialect, their own version of the language even. And the foreigners, these people who are there, they're just so amazed. They say, how is it possible that these people, could speak our language? How could this happen? How could they be speaking to us in our native language? It makes no sense. And some people are like, well, they're probably just day drinkers, They're probably just drunk out of their minds. And they're like, no, but there's no way they could be like saying and speaking in my language at the same time. I read this week, and I'm like, what changed? Because the disciples that I read about in the Gospels are much different men than I read about in Acts chapter 1 and Acts chapter 2. And 27 other chapters, 26 other chapters. I guess we're in the last, Acts 29. Way different men, right? What changed? They'd experienced some things, right? They'd experienced some things that changed things forever. They were fearful men that became fearless. Like they were powerless men that became powerful. This boldness just rises up in them. It's just like nothing like anybody had ever seen before. These are people who had been so afraid and people who had scattered and doing very little things right, and all of a sudden this boldness just rises up in them, right? Unlike anything. And you find that boldness is behavior that is born out of what they've believed, isn't it? What they've chosen to believe. Their belief has changed, hasn't it? Something's shifted, something's altered. And this boldness rises up in them that's born out of a place of belief. Did you know that their fear was also born out of belief? All their other emotions, their doubts, their unbelief, their lack of faith, all of that was behavior that was born out of belief as well. All of that was. But in this moment, something shifted that changed the course of their life. And the every day that would follow would be altered as the result. And this boldness is birthed. I can't stop it. I can't keep quiet. I can't hold it back. I can't stop sharing. This is all of a sudden, like men who feared death didn't fear death anymore. I don't know, right? They didn't fear it anymore. I stopped this week, this story, this stuff. I mean, I've read it so many times, and it just sort of like arrested my heart, right? Like this week, and I just felt like, could it be that there is a side of God that I haven't experienced? Like, I'm asking myself that question. Like, is there a side of God, or is there another layer to God that I haven't experienced yet? But if I did, right? I too wouldn't be able to keep quiet, wouldn't be able to stop talking about him. Is it possible that I'm missing something? Is it possible that there's more to God than what I have tasted and seen? Is it possible that there's more to him than what I've experienced? Let me tell you, if you think you've experienced all there is about God, you're 100% wrong, right? There's more. These guys, I want to experience God like this. I want to know God like this. All of a sudden, Peter stands up. Bunch of day drinkers, bunch of whatever, and he's like, all right, I think I should address what's happening, and he stands up. When Peter delivers the very first sermon in the history of the church, and he begins to preach about the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and he addresses an audience of thousands who were there the day Jesus was crucified. Many of them probably said, crucify him, crucify him, crucify him. And he stands up and begins to preach, and he says, that same Jesus that you crucified, but whom God raised back to life, is why we are here today. And he begins to preach the message of the resurrected Lord. I mean, scandalous. I mean, the kind of message you'd be arrested for in their day. And they were. I mean, let's just flip over a couple chapters to Acts chapter 4, when they were arrested for preaching about the resurrected Jesus Christ. And he begins to go on and he begins to preach this message to these people who are there from all over the earth, all over. And the Bible says something significant happens, Acts 2:37. It says, Peter's words pierced their hearts. And they said to him and to the other apostles, brothers, what should we do? And I'd love to preach a message. I mean, it's kind of funny, but very real. People said something like that. What do we do with this? What should I do? I can't walk out of here. I can't leave here without doing something with what I've heard. And that's what's happening here. And what happens is Peter says to them, he says, all you got to do is you got to repent and you got to be baptized. He says you got to repent. It's more than just sin here. He's not just talking about removing some sin. He's saying you've got to change the way that you think about Jesus. You got to change the way you believe about Jesus, because there's some behavior that is born out of wrong thinking and bad beliefs. And then he says, then you got to go get baptized, guys. You need to make a public declaration that you're all in with Jesus. And the Bible tells us that 3,000 people stand up and say, I want Jesus. I want Jesus. Give me Jesus. 3,000 people stand up in that moment. This is the opening day for the church at the ballpark, right? It's opening day. This is day one in the history of the church. I don't know about you, but man, I want to be like this. too much religion. There's too much fake stuff out there to follow. I want something real, authentic in my life. And I feel like when you experience God like this, everything starts to seem possible, right? Everything starts to seem possible. There's this fearlessness that emerges from what they've experienced. You notice in this story, like their boldness wasn't coming from what they had seen. This is why we don't live by sight. This is why we live by faith. This is why we live by what we know, not by what we see, right? Their boldness doesn't come from what they have seen. It doesn't come from what they've been taught. It doesn't come from what they've heard. You notice that the first sermon in the history of the church wasn't about, here's all the things Jesus taught us. These are the things Jesus said. Jesus was here. This is what he told us. The first sermon in the history of the church was all about Jesus is alive. He has conquered death. He is resurrected. He has come back to life. And it is the greatest message in the history of the world. And that's the first sermon. Sometimes I feel like, man, I'd be bold too if I could see those things. The disciples saw those things all the time, and they weren't bold. They were afraid, weren't they? So what that tells me is that if I want a life like that, it's not necessarily what I see, it's what I experience. That means that I need to experience God differently than maybe I have. I think, man, if I was an eyewitness to the resurrection, I may not be an eyewitness, but I can tell you right now that I am a witness to the resurrection of Jesus. It's an event that's changed everything. You and I, we are witnesses to the resurrection of Jesus because the resurrected Christ lives in you. You understand that? You're a witness to the fact that not only did God raise Jesus up and bring him back to life, but that he raised you up and brought you back to life as well. You are a witness to the resurrection of Jesus Christ. There is resurrection power that flows through your veins. The very Spirit of God, God's Spirit, Father God, his Spirit, the Bible says, raised Jesus from the dead. It says the very Spirit that raised Christ Jesus from the dead is in you. Resurrection power flows through your veins and flows through mine as well. That should change everything, I think. That should change everything. What's the aftermath going to look like? Man, when the church figures that out, would you stand with me this morning? And so often, I look out and I see like a church that globally seems like it's in decline, seems like it's not, relevant or viable, making much of a cultural change. It's become like this really religious thing, It's become this like, got to check off my attendance, got to just show up, got to drop some money in the plate, or the pastor's going to call me. I don't know what it is. It's become this thing it's never meant to be. It was meant to be like a movement. It's meant to be this. It was meant to be this. And I wonder, what would change if the people of God started to experience him in ways they'd never experienced him before? What would alter? It seems like the church just keeps taking it on the chin time after time. Like you see it in culture. Well, there we lost that battle. We lost this battle. We're giving up that ground. And it seems to me that if the people who inhabit our churches would experience the living God, in new ways and understand that there are more things to God than I have ever tasted or seen, and I start to press in and I start to chase, I start to go after, I start to say, God, give it all to me. I want it all. I don't want to stop short. If it's you, I want it. And you experience him in a whole new way. I wonder if the church would no longer shrink back, but would start to be everything it's meant to be. That's the church that I want us to be building here. A church filled with people who experience God, and it changes the way that they live their life. There is no time to do anything other than that. You just bow your heads with me this morning. If you're here today and maybe you feel some of those same emotions I felt this week, and if there's more to God, I want it. You just would say today, Pastor Jordan, I want more of God. If there's more, I want it. I'd love to just pray and encourage you today. You just want to raise your hands this morning. Let me pray with you. There's more. I want more of God. I need more of God. He needs to increase in my life. He needs to increase, right? That's what John says. John 3:30 says that he would increase and I would decrease, that he would become greater, that I would become less. Thank you. All over this room, Spirit of God, would you come? Heavenly Father, I just ask in the name of Jesus, supernatural increase into the room. I pray for more right now. More. God, I ask that every person here right now, under the sound of my voice, would experience more of you. New levels. New places. New thoughts. God, would you bring more of your Spirit, more of your presence. God, I ask that it would change the way that we live, that it would alter our life. I ask for just a moment, but Lord, I ask for even more than that, an aftermath, years and years after, that have been forever altered because of the increase we're asking for right now, because of the more that we're asking for right now. God, would you fill up your people, fill them up this morning to overflowing. It is defeating to get up on Monday morning and go do life feeling like I'm not full and like we're not filled up. God, would you fill every person today, right now, to overflowing. God, an increase in Jesus' name. An increase in Jesus' name. God, if there's more, we want it. God, if there's more, we want it. If there's more, we want it, God. Lord, I pray you'd wake up people in the night burdened to intercede and pray. God, I pray for dreams this week, supernatural dreams. I pray for that experience unlike any other. Change the way that we live. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Amen. Man, you guys are awesome. Love you so much. Have an awesome week, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Hang out if you want. I'm sure she'll play if she wants. Yeah. See you guys.